Joe Rogan and sedition trending this morning. Not together. I just think it's kind of funny that I wake up, get to my computer, and I see the What's Happening tab showing Joe Rogan is trending, and beneath him is sedition. Just goes to show you what our priorities are these days. And there is something to talk about when it comes to Joe Rogan and what's going on with this latest controversy. On the episode of his podcast where he had Josh Szeps, the ABC broadcaster, Australia ABC, not America, he had a conversation about myocarditis risk in kids. And Joe got criticism because I guess he didn't address it well enough. And I will actually pile on, I suppose, and say I think Joe didn't address it on his show properly, because the issue of myocarditis and vaccination is an interesting one. And there was a very simple point Joe could have brought up. But I'm actually not here to criticize Joe. I will also add, I've done like how many segments about Joe in the past couple of weeks? I actually find it strange. And I didn't want to be doing a segment discussing what's going on around Joe Rogan, but let's be real. Biggest show, biggest podcast, one of the biggest shows, period, one of the biggest political shows, period. He just had McMaster on his show, and Joe has made himself one of the most relevant and politically relevant figures just by the work he's doing. I'm sure he probably doesn't see it, as nearly as big as many others do, but it's resulting in a wave of press around these ideas. And in the culture war, the reason I thought it would be great to address this issue of myocarditis vaccination, Joe Rogan and his podcast, is because Joe Rogan and sedition are trending. The issue of sedition has to do with the Oath Keepers, 10 of whom were charged with seditious conspiracy, and the 11th being their leader, Stuart Rhodes. And this is very, very serious stuff. All of a sudden, you've got establishment and authoritarian publications saying, aha, sedition, it's here. And Glenn Greenwald brings up a really great point. He said, after a year of there being no evidence of sedition and no charges related to insurrection, Merrick Garland, under pressure, says, okay, we will arrest more people. And now, a year later, we're getting sedition charges. So to anybody paying attention, it's obvious. The narrative was busted. Insurrection wasn't playing out. And all of a sudden, Merrick Garland's like, okay, we got it. Everything that these people are being charged with, we knew about. It just took them this long to do it because Merrick Garland was under political pressure. That just goes to show the huge problems we're facing in this country as everything gets ripped apart, which brings me now to what I think is also very relevant, and that's Joe Rogan on his show. Joe tweeted, if anyone was going to make me look dumb on the podcast, I'm glad it's Josh Szeps because I love him and he's awesome. However, this is why I was confused. Joe Rogan's fantastic. He's a good dude. And this just goes to show why he is a good dude. Josh Szeps on Joe Rogan's show, he is not a good dude. He is duplicitous. He is a liar. He's a state propagandist. Joe called him out in many ways, but Joe is still trying to be nice to the guy. And I respect that because I often do similar things, but I don't think I'm as nice as Joe. I try not to insult people, but I've certainly insulted people or just gotten frustrated or angry with them because there's a line. If you get a guy from ABC, this guy Josh Szeps is the guy who came out and said that the quarantine camps where people are being taken without due process were international arrival bungalows. And he said that I was incorrect for calling them out. Then sure enough, shortly after, they start detaining people without charge or trial. Okay. But I feel like I'm off on a tangent. The story here is Joe responded to what happened on his show. He says the video is cringy, but it's what happens when you stumble in a long-form podcast when you didn't know a subject was going to come up and you wing it. This is a Substack article on the Nature of Medicine paper revisited by Vinay Prasad. This is what Joe Rogan has posted. Now, in the clip, and this is really important stuff, and it's also dangerous stuff. I'm sure YouTube doesn't like it. Joe Rogan said that the risk of myocarditis in children is like, 2 to 4 times? It increases their risk of myocarditis like 2 to 4 times, something like that. There have been many papers. Let me slow down. There are a few studies, I want to make sure I'm being precise, that show for young boys, the vaccine increases their risk of myocarditis. Josh Szeps then correctly states that the risk of myocarditis from COVID is actually higher in children. Joe says he doesn't think this is true. Joe is actually correct. And now I bring you, my friends, to the issue of alternative facts and how it gets really difficult to navigate what's going on in the world. Josh Szeps was right. I'm not a fan of the guy. Obviously, I've been arguing with him for some time. But the risk of myocarditis from COVID is worse than the risk of myocarditis from the vaccine. However, there is one study, we have this from The Guardian from September, boys more at risk from Pfizer jab side effect than COVID suggests study. This is one study. And that's important, but there are many more studies showing that myocarditis from COVID is, there's a higher risk of it. The important thing to understand is Joe looked at this study and he said, wow, that's interesting. And then he brought it up. When we talked about this on Timcast IRL, when this study came out 4 months ago, I think we did a very good job of trying to break this down, pointing out, look, you get one study, it's reported in the press, it's more reported by right-wing sources and left-wing sources. It doesn't mean it's 100% true because it's hard to navigate this space. The Guardian reported, healthy boys may be more likely to be admitted to the hospital with a rare side effect of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine that causes inflammation of the heart than with COVID itself, U.S. researchers claim. Their analysis of medical data suggests that boys aged 12 to 15 with no underlying medical conditions are 4 to 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with vaccine-related myocarditis than ending up in a hospital with COVID over a 4-month period. But this is not, my understanding is this is not about myocarditis. Now, the reason why I say Josh is correct, on the Rogan podcast, they pull up the latest data, which says the risk of myocarditis from COVID is actually higher. Look, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not here to tell you what is true or what is not true. I'm here to try and give you some skepticism, some healthy skepticism, so that ultimately you talk to a trusted medical professional. My view is you go to your doctor and you say, hey, I saw this article in The Guardian. It says that boys are more at risk from the Pfizer jab side effects than COVID. What do you think? If your doctor can't give you satisfactory answers, find a better doctor. And I say this all the time. If I hire a carpenter to build a deck and I say, what's the length of this wood and what's the weight load of this particular piece of wood relative to, say, a stronger wood, and he says, I don't know, I'd be like, I should probably get someone who actually does know because I'm going to be standing on this thing. The point is, we're trying to navigate this space, and you've got politics playing a role in everything. So naturally, when Joe Rogan, in my opinion, has an honest conversation and brings up these points, he gets attacked because there is a political agenda behind everything. And yes, there is a political agenda behind many people on the right who are very opposed to the vaccine. And that's why when this story came out, tons of people on the right were saying like, look, not every single person, mind you. And my response was, that's crazy. It's one study. Take it into consideration. Ask your doctors about it. And there you go. I mean, I'm not going to look at this and be like, oh, it's definitive truth. I do think, however, the data has shown there is a risk of myocarditis following sequential COVID-19 vaccinations by age and sex. We have this from MedRxiv. This was posted, I think Majid Nawaz posted this. There is a reality here. Absolutely. Joe correctly points out in his show as well that if you're going to vaccinate 300 million people, that means you're going to be giving out 600 million doses. And now with boosters, 900 million. Yeah, you're going to get a high number of adverse events from the vaccination. That's a fact. But think of it this way. What we're really interested in is vaccine adverse events per capita, not necessarily total numbers. I often see people on the right talking about the VAERS report of like 21,000 deaths reported in VAERS. Okay. And while it is true that VAERS is individuals reporting their, what happened, it's not, these reports are not like a doctor that performed an autopsy and said something was true. It's people saying, hey, my dad got the vaccine within a day. He had a heart attack, was in the hospital and things like that. But the important factor is people are highlighting this and saying, look at VAERS. Whoa, when we rolled out this vaccine, there was only 1,000. Now there's 21,000. What's happening? And I'm like, we're doing a mass vaccination rollout. So the number is larger, meaning adverse events will be a larger number as well. We need to break it down by percentage. I am not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do with your health, man. This is all on you. I am here to point out that I think Joe is the honest one in the room, and the other guy is the dishonest one in the room. Let me tell you. Let me just put it very simply. The CDC director, Walensky, said last summer, the one thing the vaccine can't do is prevent transmission. And I think that's evident by what we're seeing now in New York City, particularly with the Omicron variant. Well, they're saying it's Omicron. I don't know how they test for it. But New York is one of the most vaccinated places in the country, and they're seeing a record surge in COVID cases. Around 25% of the nation's COVID cases, I believe, come out of New York. Okay. Transmission is rampant. Now, here's where it's interesting. In the conversation Joe Rogan had with Josh Szeps, he was correct when he said there was an increased risk of myocarditis from the vaccines. That's true. We've seen it. Ultimately, I think it's a cost-benefit analysis that you need to talk to a medical professional about if you're concerned about it. I believe even the CDC, or was it the FDA? I mean, one of them made an advisory about Johnson & Johnson due to, I think it was blood clots. I'm not sure. But we've seen these reports have come out of the EU. Regulators have talked about, suspending certain vaccines over fears of myocarditis and blood clots. These adverse events exist. But I believe the official response was that the likelihood of you experiencing them is substantially lower than a complication from COVID, which brings me to the bigger point. If you can still get COVID, then my question is this, and I'll break it down. Joe's response to Josh Szeps, in my opinion, should have been, oh, wow, I didn't realize that there was a higher risk of myocarditis from COVID according to the latest data, and not the vaccines. I suppose then, if you give a child a vaccine, but they are still able to get COVID, then they're going to have a higher risk of myocarditis than if they weren't vaccinated, correct? Now, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Ultimately, I don't have the full picture, right? What I mean is, even if you get, let's say a kid gets vaccinated and he has a higher risk of myocarditis, then he ends up getting COVID. But if the vaccines reduce the severity of symptoms, which is what, basically all of the mainstream reporting has told us, then maybe he is still better off, even if he has a greater risk of myocarditis. I guess we can break it down this way. Myocarditis is not the only complication. There are many other things to consider. And I'll tell you, man, I experienced COVID, and it was the worst illness I've ever experienced. I don't know why I had it so bad. Some people have said, I was asked, do you regret? Well, you know what? I'm not going to get too much into it. I've seen people downplay it. I would not wish COVID on anybody, and I think it's really bad. And I've had some very scary, it's scary. It is. I'm not saying for me, obviously, I was worried enough to call a doctor and get medical treatment. But I know people who have gotten COVID, and I'm really worried about them. I know people who have gone to the ER. Now, Joe says he knows many people who went to the ER due to vaccination adverse events. I actually do know a handful, a couple people. I want to make sure I'm very precise in this. A couple people that I know personally definitively had adverse reactions to the vaccine. But it's known. I suppose the challenge here is conversations like this are impossible to have because of YouTube's threat of censorship. And so you have a lot of people who are refusing to speak up about it, a lot of people who are scared to speak up about it, and thus we're not getting a legitimate conversation on cost-benefit analysis, which I can't tell you. I can't tell you what you should choose to do, right? You got to go to a doctor and you make sure that they give you sound advice. And aside from not wanting to get banned, I also don't want to be legally responsible for advocating for some kind of, kooky treatment or anything like that. So I'll just put it this way. I know people who have gone to the ER. Actually, I know more people who have gone to the ER from the vaccine than I do from COVID. And that to me is crazy. But it's hard to break down. They're different. It was different things. One person had nerve damage, but they were mostly fine. They were just shaking. One person actually really sick from the vaccine. And, to me and my family, confirmed. But if you go to the CDC website, if you go to the FDA website, they will tell you there are adverse events from the vaccine. They're not saying it's not true. The problem is this. The problem is websites like the Daily Beast. Look, you do have elements of the right that will say, look at all the VAERS reporting. This proves it. No, it doesn't. You need to consider the fact that if you give people, it's the scaling problem I refer to it. If you give 1 million people a vaccine and there is a 0.1% chance of, adverse events, and it plays out, well, now you've got 1,000 sick people and you get all this news and people are like, there are a lot of stories about this. And then if you do it to 100 million people, now you have 100,000 people in the hospital, everyone's going to be losing their minds. The proportion is the same, but because you give it to more people, you get more stories, and humans have that bias. That's something very important to consider. Joe Rogan did bring that up in an honest conversation. The Daily Beast says Joe Rogan is mainstreaming right-wing misinformation. What? What is right-wing about any of this? I am so sick of the cult, okay? It's a cult. The Daily Beast, you're a cult. You're cult leaders. You put out cult garbage. Joe Rogan had an honest conversation. He read The Guardian. Isn't this insane? Right-wing misinformation from The Guardian. You stupid effing... I won't swear this time like I did yesterday. What about Joe Rogan as right-wing? What has he said? That he's pro-life? He opposes gay marriage? He wants traditional families? What does that even mean? Right-wing misinformation. It's The Guardian, for heaven's sake. This is the stupidity of the modern era, and this is what I just can't stand about what's, the media reports something. Joe Rogan says it. The media calls him right-wing. Shut your stupid crackpot mouths. I'm glad to see Joe Biden's Quinnipiac approval rating at 33%. Fauci's trust at 31%. You must be truly stupid to believe these people at this point. This is what I see. When I see Joe Rogan trending alongside sedition, what that means is, while certainly one is more important than the other, in my opinion, you can see the culture war is so real that Joe Rogan bringing up a Guardian article on his show is called right-wing misinformation because these people are effing psychopathic cult members. If you are so stupid that 4 months ago you read The Guardian and today the Daily Beast tells you it's right-wing misinformation and you're like, okay, that's correct, then please bow out of the political space. This is the insanity of the modern condition. The Daily Beast says he's got a bigger audience than Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity combined and just might be doing more damage. Media Matters Alex Paterson, whatever, says on the latest New Abnormal. I don't care. The Daily Beast is a crackpot psychopathic website that writes garbage. And of course, most of you probably knew that, so why am I even bringing it up? Well, I guess the issue is because Joe Rogan is trending on Twitter because other crackpot cult members are putting out garbage information. So do me this favor. Do Joe Rogan this favor. Share the Guardian article. Share his tweet and ask your cult member friends and family, how is it right-wing misinformation when it's reported by The Guardian? Is The Guardian right-wing? And see what they say. Because this is how we break the narrative. Now, to be fair, we are breaking the narrative. CNN's ratings are down 90%. Thank you. Someone up there must truly be helping us out. Or maybe it's just evil will not prevail. CNN's psychotic babbling is now, people aren't even watching anymore. Thank you. Good. I ask you this. In relation to what Joe Rogan is saying, what have I said on my show, Timcast IRL, that is right-wing? Yeah, see, it doesn't mean anything anymore. We were talking about this the other day. We had Matt Kibbe, libertarian feller. We had on the show, and I brought this up because we were talking about this, and I was like, what about this show is right-wing? Luke goes on these anti-Trump rants, and the Trump supporters are like, Luke, rah. And Ian, he slammed Trump heavily, and then I actually defended Trump, and that's always been my position. My position is like, stop making me defend the guy. But when you go Trump derangement syndrome, I'm like, dude, right now we've got this post from RNC Research claiming that Kamala Harris told people to do Google. As if she said, if you want to find information, do Google, because she never said that. And now there's memes going around where it's a quote that says, do Google. It's so annoying. I don't want to defend Kamala Harris, but don't lie about what she said. She did not tell people to do Google. She said, when people are looking for something across town, they usually do Google it. That's it. What? That's if you were like, when people are trying to climb a large platform, they usually do jump on it. You don't say, do jump to get on top of a ladder. That's misquoting her. And why are you doing that? She's stupid enough. You don't need to do it. I don't care if it's the left or the right. Quote people properly so we can properly inform people and they can make better decisions for their lives. But I tell you this, it's the exception on the right, it's the rule on the left. The Guardian reports this. Boys more at risk from Pfizer jab side effect than COVID study suggests. Does that mean it's definitively true? No, it's one study. It was reported by The Guardian. Ian Sample, the science editor, reported it in September. Joe Rogan quotes it, and the left mocks him and calls it right-wing misinformation. Just please, help break people from this cult. It seems like we're winning, and I'm very happy with that. The more Joe Rogan talks, the better off we are. But show him the article from The Guardian. What I can't stand, you know what I can't stand? Exactly that Kamala Harris scenario. They post the quote from her. I watched the video and I was like, did she really tell people to do Google? That's crazy. And then she didn't. And I said, why are you putting out this trash? I just can't stand it, man. I don't care about the left. I don't care about the right. I don't care about up, down, whatever. I care about accurate information. And when I see everything they lied about with Trump, it frustrates me. But anyway, I'll get to that point about, IRL, because I got derailed. What about that show is right wing, right? Right and left don't mean anything anymore. So on Timcast IRL, Luke's a very libertarian, anarcho-capitalist kind of character, not a fan of Trump, the Republicans, or the Democrats. Ian is this weird authoritarian left-leaning tech guy. Lydia, our producer, she's just traditional conservative. Then you have me, which is like center-left, post-liberal, politically homeless, frequently, defending Trump while being somewhat critical of him. We have an eclectic voice and we have these disagreements. And then we bring on various personalities, guests, typically conservative and libertarian types. Some leftists. We actually just did have a liberal on the show, Batya, and she was fantastic, but the left really doesn't want to come on the show. They call it right wing. They call it right wing. And you know what, man? So be it. If right wing just means like real world, fine. I remember that line when Colbert said, reality has a liberal bias. Perhaps that was the case 20 years ago, good sir, but today, y'all live in crackpot fantasy land where 4 months after left-wing The Guardian publishes data, they're calling it right-wing misinformation. So please, spare me. Joe Rogan is not right-wing. Nothing he promotes is right-wing. The dude is in favor of universal basic income, for heaven's sake. But here we are. Welcome to the modern condition, my friends, but you heard it here. There you go. Let me show you this. Let me show you from the New Republic. In a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court upholds the COVID pandemic. Oh, shut up, you lunatics. But whatever. It's frustrating, isn't it? Look, it would help me out if you share these videos. I think I do a good job of breaking down my points. And if you think it's effective, please consider sharing this with people who are trapped in the matrix. But at the very least, all you need to do is take the Daily Beast article and the Guardian article and ask your friends and family about it. Is Joe Rogan spreading right-wing misinformation? The article's the Guardian. Is that right-wing? How does that make sense? Unless we lurch so far leftward. But what does left even mean at this point? What does right-wing misinformation mean? It's so dumb. Right-wing misinformation like what? Traditional families are good for children? Whatever. I'm over it. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.